So this is our first lecture on the APA manual. Now let me start by saying that the APA manual is going to be your Bible in this class. You are going to refer to this book regularly. For those of you who bought it for 110 and then had to buy it again for 304, I hope you learned your lesson and now choose to keep this book, because this book will help you write papers in all of your upper division courses. So today we're talking about citing and referencing. Why do we cite and why do we have reference lists? We cite because we need to attribute those ideas and those words to the people who rightly own them. You would not want someone else to steal your ideas or take your words and pawn them off as your own. So you must give credit where credit is due. Now, this means that you have to cite anything that the average person does not know. So while you've been studying criminology and criminal justice for, who knows, two years or so, you need to consider whether, the random farmer in the middle of the country also knows what you're writing about. If they do not, then you must cite it. You must cite from where your ideas have come. I hope that's clear. So why do we have reference lists? So we have a reference list because your writing and your papers are going to be so amazing that the reader of your papers is going to want to locate the sources that you use. And so based on your citations that are in your paper, the reader will be able to look at the reference list to also locate that document or that book or that website from which you obtain that information. So we cite so we can give credit where credit is due, and we have reference lists so we can locate the source of the information you cited. So let's look at reference lists. Here are 3 examples of references. So we have one that is a publishable PDF file put out by, it looks like, the U.S. Department of Justice. We have your textbook, and then we have a journal article. So as you can see, these reference lists tell us who the authors are, the year it was published, the title of the document, where it's published, and who published it. I want to highlight here the PDF. So the first reference. PDFs are published documents. That means that file that you obtained online should have an author, it should have a title, it should have a publisher, and it should have a location. It is your job when you are referencing PDF files to locate that information. The next source is your textbook. I want you to study this example. This is how any reference from your textbook should look. So this tells us that they are citing Goffredson and Hershey's theory, and that the theory was originally written in 1990 but was republished in this edited book in 2014. And I know it's an edited book because Cullen, Agnew, and Wilcox are listed in this reference as editors. And this book, it seems as though, is the 5th edition, meaning that there are 4 other editions prior to this one. And it also provides me with the page numbers of this article. Or the last reference here shows us that here we have a journal article. These are the authors. It was published in 2011. This is the title. These are the pages. But it also tells me which volume of the journal this is in. So Deviant Behavior, apparently, as of 2011, had 32 different volumes. This particular article is in the 32nd volume, but in the first issue. So there are often 4 issues per journal. And it really depends on how frequently a journal publishes articles. So sometimes it's quarterly, sometimes it's monthly, and so that will dictate the number of issues that the journal produces. So now we're looking at citations. So what do these citations tell us? Well, the first one, Goverton and Hershey, it tells us that this is actually a direct quote, that the writer of this paper is quoting Goverton and Hershey's original 1990 work that was republished in 2014, and this is the page number in the 2014 text that they are quoting. The next citation tells us that this is a paraphrase, that they're not directly quoting, that they're actually paraphrasing what Payne, Triplett, and Higgins wrote about. So citing and referencing your textbook. Now this is critical. It would be helpful here if you took out your textbook at this time to review how to cite and reference the book. So if you look at your textbook, you can see that Cullen, Agnew, and Wilcox are your editors, as on the very front page of the textbook. And you will see that this is the 5th edition. What's important about the textbook is that some of the pieces are written by the editors, and the majority of the chapters are actually written by various people. So you need to be aware then of which part of the text you are citing and referencing. And this is critical for paper part 2, because you need to make sure, again, that you give credit to where credit's due. You don't want to give credit to Cullen, Agnew, and Wilcox if they didn't write that piece, because Goverton and Hershey would be pissed off if you give them that credit. So who did what? If you look in the table of contents, the editors wrote the introductions to each part of the text. So if you see there's section 1, part 1, so those pages are actually written by the editors. So if you turn then, for example, to page 27, all of that italicized portion that precedes the article is written by the editors. So the rest of that chapter is actually written by Beccaria. So if you look at the table of contents, again, you can see that number 1 is written by Beccaria, number 2 is written by Lombroso. And so that's how you can identify which is written by the editors and which is written by the authors. So for what the editors wrote, this is what the reference would look like. Okay, and this is on page 202 in your APA manual. So here you can see that we're just referencing the editors, and you need, again, very similar to what I showed you on the almost the very first slide, where you have the title, you have the name of the book, and you have the page numbers. When you're citing them in text, you cite Cullen, Agnew, and Wilcox 2014. Every subsequent citation in that text is an et al, because when you have 3 or more authors, you use et al in the subsequent citation. This is what it looked like if it was parenthetical format. I want to highlight that the end is an ampersand in the citation. That is parenthetical. And then in subsequent citations, again, you use the et al. Now for the articles and essays that are in the text, so if you're looking back at page 27 in Beccaria, you can see the title is an essay on crimes and punishments. It is in Cullen and Agnew's work. The question you might have right now is, where do we get the year 1775? So on the bottom of the first page of every section that is written by an original author, you have originally cited year. So here you can see it was originally published in 1775. And that is important Because if you reference it as something written in 1983, the reader is going to be like, but Beccaria was dead in 1983, right? He was long gone by 1983. So you want to focus on the original publication date. And you can see the same if you turn to page 47. You have the Glukes written in 1950. And you can see the same thing if you're looking at page 140, where Akers' theory was written in 1994. So that's what your reference should look like when using your textbook. For the articles and the essays, for the citations, it's very similar, except this is only one author here that I'm giving as an example, Beccaria. And again, you need that original year because it demonstrates that this is the year it was originally written. It doesn't confuse the reader, especially those readers who know that Beccaria has since passed. On page 177 in the APA manual, it outlines the basic citation styles. And this is really helpful for when you are writing your papers. You can always go back to cross-check this table. What I want to identify here in particular is the bottom two, but the second to last, the groups readily identified through abbreviation as authors. So here you have the National Institute of Health. And so this is how your citations should look when you are also including an acronym. I'll give you another example on the next slide. Okay, so here we have a website. Most students get really confused about how to cite from a website. Now this varies for each website, but every reference has some specific components, right? It has a title, it has an author, it has a year, it has a publisher, and it has a location of publication. The only exception to that tends to be your journal articles or newspapers, right? You don't include the publisher, you don't include the location. Instead, you include the title of the newspaper or journal article. So here's an example. The title of this particular portion of the site is Violent Gang Initiatives. The author is the FBI because it is their website. The year, you have to scroll down often to the very bottom of the page. You want to look for a copyright year, or you want to look for any year in which that particular material was posted on their website. The Federal Bureau of Investigation is housed within the Department of Justice, so they publish any FBI material, and they're located in Washington, D.C. So in text, this is what the citation would look like. Federal Bureau of Investigation, you put in brackets FBI. You put in brackets because you already have the parentheses surrounding the citation. If you were just saying that the Federal Bureau of Investigation found, so it wasn't at the end of a sentence, for example, then you would include the FBI brackets, but you would not include the comma. And this is what the reference would look like. Federal Bureau of Investigation, 2011, August, Violent Gang Initiatives, Washington, D.C., Department of Justice, retrieved, and that's the website. Here is another website. So this one is a New York Times article. You have the title, you have the author, you have the year, you have the publisher, right? It's published in the New York Times. And again, a location is not needed for the newspaper. So this is what it would look like in text. And here you can see the reference. Perez Pena, R. period 2015. You have the exact date on which this was published. 1 in 4 Marion experienced sexual assault on campus. New York Times is a newspaper, so all articles are italicized. And then again, you have your website. So the final one I'm going to show you for a website, it's a different kind of website, is the National Gang Center website. You will see that the title is a National Youth Gang Survey Analysis. It's the National Gang Center as the author because it is their website. If you look all around that page, you do not see a date, so it's ND for no date. Then you have the Bureau of Justice Assistance as the publisher and the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, which you can see at the very bottom of that page, both of which are housed in Washington, D.C. So similar to the FBI, you have the National Gang Center, and you can use its acronym. Because you have the parenthetical citation with National Gang Center in that citation, you have a comma after the acronym. Then you have the National Gang Center that is outside the parenthetical, so then you don't need the comma following the bracketed acronym. And then here you can see how the reference should look. I know this can be confusing, especially as you start writing paper part 1, because you're going to be obtaining a lot of statistical data, some of which is going to come from websites. You should have one that comes from an academic article. But refer back, please, to this PowerPoint and this lecture to review how to appropriately cite and reference these materials. You are graded on your referencing and citing format. Also, again, use the Bible, the APA manual, for any additional questions you may have. And if you're absolutely confused, you can always use the Q&A to contact me. It might be helpful if you use the Q&A because other students might have the same question as you, but if you don't, then please just email me.